up, we have the, what was it, investment banker or finance major? Yeah, do you want this one or do you want the headset? Okay. So our next speaker is Ryland Giebelhaus, who's coming from the University of Alberta, and he's going to talk about metabolomics and exposomics for fetal and neonatal cannabis exposure.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that introduction. So I'll be talking today about my work using multidimensional gas-chromatography, time-of-flight mass spec, for looking at how cannabis use during pregnancy impacts the mother and the baby's metabolism. So I'm sure everyone knows what cannabis is, so I won't go too much into detail, but it is a drug. It comes from the plant cannabis sativa. There's multiple different ways to consume cannabis products. Particularly in Canada, I won't talk about what other countries do and how they have products, but in 2018, we have this guy, Justin Trudeau, who legalized cannabis. And really, in Canada, we've had a long use of cannabis use that's been accepted, especially in my home province of British Columbia. People have been smoking cannabis there for 50 years, and really no one has faced any criminal prosecution as a result of that. So we have a long storied history of cannabis use. You can just buy products now at cannabis stores everywhere in Canada. They're on every corner. You can buy things from live plants to drinks to coffee pods to tinctures and different products and raw flour, and you can go home and consume them. And they are regulated and they come from licensed producers, but you can purchase them and use them, and there's all these different products and they have different concentrations. 1 in 3 Canadians have reported cannabis use in the last 12 months. And it's also a $10 billion market in Canada. So this is a really large market right now in Canada. Cannabis, the active compounds in cannabis are cannabinoids, and they're metabolized in the liver. They're very lipophilic. So in cannabis, the cannabinoids such as THC and CBD, they enter the liver and they undergo phase 1 metabolism through cytochrome P450s, which oxidize them. And then phase 2 metabolism adds different groups, functional groups, which increase the polarity and make them more water soluble. Glucuronidine, glucuronic acid is the most common one that's added to cannabinoids, so it adds the sugar moiety to the cannabinoids, and then they're excreted in the urine. Prenatal cannabis use is sort of a growing concern in places where cannabis is legalized and even in places where cannabis is not legalized. So a study out of California reported that 5% of pregnant women use cannabis daily or weekly. People do this for treat anxiety, sleep reasons, nausea, other symptoms that come along with pregnancy, and also just because they use cannabis, and that's what they do during pregnancy. And they've made the choice to use cannabis during pregnancy. Between 2002 and 2014, cannabis use has increased 62%. And there's also a perception that cannabis causes no harm as well. And this remains true even in some groups that are using this for during pregnancy. But it's really tough to actually study how cannabis use during pregnancy, if it's harmful, and how much cannabis is actually a biologically relevant level. So some current research right now has examined cannabis use during pregnancy and found that there's decreased birth weights, higher chance of preterm birth, and also there's some conflicting results on neurodevelopmental outcomes. But there's a lot of problems just across looking at how we measure cannabis dosages for cannabis research. We don't really know what a cannabis dose is when there's thousands of products in cannabis stores. How do you know what a cannabis dose is? It's tough to measure different exposures. Each administration route is different. The products are far from homogeneous, and also there's first versus secondhand exposure. So we need further work so that we can allow families to have information to make informed decisions. So this brings us to the study, the Healthy Baby Brain Study, or we call it the Mums and Babies Study sometimes. And this is a really large cohort study at the University of Alberta. It's very interdisciplinary. It includes physicians, psychologists, and of course analytical chemists. And we're looking at how do prenatal cannabis exposures influence the physiology, metabolism, and development in infants. Recruiting 400 mothers that are expecting in the Edmonton area, with about half of them reporting some form of cannabis use or cannabis exposure. We're looking at urine and breast milk untargeted metabolomics, and I'll be talking about the urinary results today in the interest of time, and we're also looking at some passive and active air sampling as well. So we're using GC-TOFMS for untargeted metabolomics, using a LECO-BT instrument right here, and we're doing two-step derivatization before to derivatize these polar metabolites so we can detect them and analyze them and see what's going on in the urine of the mother and the baby. So like I said, measuring the dose of cannabis is really challenging. So what we've done is we give out these surveys to the mothers that are expecting, and and the mothers that have given birth, and they report a value based on what they estimate their cannabis exposure to be. 0 or control is never used, and partner does not use cannabis. And then we go all the way from really haven't used in the last 12 months, partner not using, used in the past 12 months, partner not using, all the way up to daily or almost daily use. And this is just currently what we have in our exposure matrix for the samples I'll be talking about today. So about a quarter of the participants are in the control group, they're not exposed, and then everyone else is in the exposed group. And we have urine from different time points. So the first urine collected at 18 to 26 weeks, second urine 32 to 34 weeks, and then the third urine is collected right after birth. So looking at the metabolomics results of the aligned peak table, going through and actually trying to see how do these groups differ, just using these labels, just a 2-class, exposed or not exposed. We don't see any difference by Permanova. There's no statistical difference as well. There's no trend even observed when we apply the labels to this. And this was really kind of, it's not surprising considering just how many metabolites we're going to see. So I used, well, first I was looking at the data and looking at replicates versus samples, and I noticed actually there was this really weird sample out here. And this sample projected with its technical replicate. It just happened to have a technical replicate run with it. So I wasn't going to reject it as an outlier. And this was the only cannabinoid that's actually identified, which was really surprising. I thought I would see way more cannabinoids in the metabolomics data set. CBC was correlated with this sample, and it seemed to really only be present in this sample in any appreciable amounts. And all the other features that were correlated with this were unidentified. They weren't putatively identified compounds. So I used feature selection, an algorithm that was developed in our lab, a cluster resolution feature selection, to find what components or what chemical components are correlated with exposed versus not exposed. Found 7 components were correlated with exposed and 88 were correlated with not exposed. None of the variables were cannabinoids or their metabolites, which again which was really, really shocking. I even went through and looked at the individual peak tables as well, did a targeted analysis. Half the variables are unidentified features as well, which might be where these cannabinoid metabolites are. So I removed the low exposures because I thought, okay, this might be a confounding factor, the really low cannabis exposures. Did it again, same thing. There's no cannabinoids that were identified. ANOVA, simultaneous component analysis, ASCA, found that the urine time factor was also significant. So including the urine time, the urine that was collected, the first, second, or third urine, that factor is significant, and we should really remove that factor once we collect more and more samples. So again, like I said, removing the low exposures works, but also perhaps we should treat each time point individually separate as well. Through this, though, we identified 70 significant features, some overlap with the original results when we included all the low exposures. But the no cannabinoids thing, so I'll just talk about this because this was really interesting just in the interest of time. We ran a bunch of cannabinoid and metabolite standards on a high-res instrument as well because we weren't seeing any of them derivatized. We see the standards, but we don't see any of them in the urine, and this is the urine of one of our highest cannabis users. So she was reporting a lot of cannabis use, and we don't see any of these metabolites. And the reason we hypothesize this, and this has been reported in a lot of the cannabis literature, is these cannabinoids are locked in this glucuronide form. And a lot of people will treat this with an enzyme to cleave this group off so it can be derivatized and amenable by GC-TOFMS. And also a lot of these, there's hundreds if not thousands of cannabinoids in cannabis, and not all of them have been identified or studied. So as they get metabolized, there's going to be these metabolites that are present, and we don't know anything about their mass spectral information. They don't exist in libraries. So that also presents a problem with this type of research too, which is really an ongoing struggle with cannabis research, with any natural products research. One last thing that was quite interesting, though, is I identified acetaminophen in quite a few samples. And I initially brought this up to the pediatrician in the study, and he was really concerned because acetaminophen during pregnancy can cause a lot of birth defects. And he kind of was worried and said, okay, can you look at this? So I looked at this, and it was only actually in that third urine in the time point, acetaminophen and its metabolites. And we sort of came to the conclusion that this is the mothers that are just using this to treat pain after giving birth. So it wasn't found in the first and second urine, which is good. So just looking at this from an exposomics profile, we can see things such as just regular pharmaceuticals and over-the-counter products which is really powerful. So anyways, these are just preliminary results from the study. This is an ongoing study. The results are going to get more interesting as we have more and more data, more statistical power, so we can do things like feature selection. We need to make sure we look at the individual time points separately. Also, many of the metabolites are not putatively identified, so we need to overcome these issues. Also getting certain assays like the beta-glucuronidide assay working so that we can cleave that beta-glucuronidide or glucuronidide group off of the metabolites so that we can derivatize it and identify them by GC-GC. And also, like I said, analyze more samples and also analyze the breast milk samples and the passive samplers. I also just wanted to mention quickly, since we're here, I'm actually starting a faculty position as an assistant professor at the University of Victoria. I'll be using multidimensional liquid chromatography for looking at exposomics, plant chemistry, and also looking at wildlife. Also some chemometrics and data analysis, and I'm recruiting grad students right now, and I'm also open to collaborate and work on multidimensional chromatography. But anyways, I'd like to thank the University of Alberta, and of course everyone who's assisted and everyone on the team.